which is, as you say, a Hindu nationalist organization, somewhat called into being by the arrogant claims made by Muslim extremists. You know, these religious wars feed off each other's mad theologies. It's also true, I must say, that I can't say I'm happy with the Indian policy in Kashmir. My feeling of friendship for India and Indians comes from this. When you're there, you realize that, okay, the BJP is in power now. It won't be in power all the time. It isn't in power in many of the states that make up India. It's not in power in West Bengal, it's not in power in Kerala, it's not in power in a number of other places. India is pluralistic. It has a secular constitution. It has seats in its parliament for all minorities, and it has extraordinary achievement, I think, of combining democracy, secularism and pluralism. Great strain, but well worth defending. And I think if it was to make more friends, the odds are that that end of the scale would go up. Is that what I wanted to do? Yes, up. And the other end of the scale would go down, the more depressing things that you mentioned. On Kashmir, listen, no Indian is completely happy with the way that Kashmir is governed, but it is the fact that in 1977 there was an election in Kashmir. It was endorsed by Sheikh Abdullah, the leader of the Muslims of Kashmir, the charismatic leader of Islam, and it did not vote for Pakistan. So I don't believe that. I don't believe it would if there was another election. But in the meantime, Pakistan has absolutely no right to be arming and training and dispatching across the border the forces of Mr. bin Laden, who nearly blew up the parliament the other day, killing a lot of people in the attempt, and who throw acid in the faces of Indian women telling them to adopt the veil. Not having any of that.
Los Angeles for Christopher Hitchens. Good morning.
Great. I like your type of argument. You basically have intellectual discussion instead of a screaming argument. I'm a libertarian. I'm basically on the opposite side of the spectrum as you. But I wonder if you could clarify a couple things for me. I believe Palestine was the entire area covering Israel and Jordan. I wonder if you could tell me at what point the Palestinians went to Jordan, and I realized they were kicked out when they blew up some passenger jets or something. And are you familiar with that?
Yes, I think more than you are, by the sound of it. I'm not sure. I don't. Well, go ahead.
Basically revolved around the Palestinians that were from Israel. I don't understand if there's 22 Arab states, why they have to take over Israel.
Well, there are 49 American states. If someone told you couldn't, apart from the one you're sitting in, if someone told you actually we would rather have your bit of Los Angeles for ourselves, from now on, this will only be this. You can only be a landholder or a householder here if you profess the, let's say, Muslim or Buddhist faith. Otherwise, get out. This bit's ours. You're happy to go to Colorado on that basis? I don't think so, and I think if you think about it, you wouldn't insult anyone else by treating them, their society or their country as disposable as that. The Palestinians do not feel that God gave the land to someone else and they therefore have to be flung out. And I completely agree with them. They've every right to resist that ridiculous proposal. By the way, could I just say, though, if you say you're a libertarian, though I must say you sound like an authoritarian where Palestinians are concerned, if you are a libertarian, you may find some nourishment in my book where I say that in the same breath as I mourn the decay of some of my socialist allegiances, that deep down, I mean, I've always been a sympathizer of the libertarian anti-statist point of view, and one of the things that attracted me to socialism in the beginning was the idea of the withering away of the state. Anyway, you might get some amusement out of it.
Keeps coming back to the book. You figured out a way to promote it.
This is America on message.
Last call from Leeds, England for Christopher Hitchens. We have about a minute left. Go ahead, please. Caller, you with us?
Hitchens. I'm another big fan of your work.
Not again.
I read a brief serialization of your novel in The Guardian yesterday.
It read like a novel, did it? That's nice. It's the same book.
Wrong word, I apologise.
No.
But do you still have hope in the face of all this religious intolerance, which I see on a local basis, living among Muslim communities, young Muslim youth, and then on a global reach? There's a lot of religious intolerance, and it's very easy to portray that as coming from the Islamic side of the world, although obviously it's both sides. Do you still have hope? Does this not feel like a clash of civilizations?
My view about that is it isn't a clash of civilizations, no. because there's too much civilization on what other people would otherwise call the other side, the Muslim side. But there's a very big clash of worldviews, and it's a fight which I personally think it's absolutely essential to have. Look, the alternative of not fighting it does not exist. You can't surrender to theocratic fascism, nor could you live or coexist with it. So that's easy. And since they make it a choice, them or us, it'll be them. We'll make absolutely sure of it.
This is what the book looks like, Letters to a Young Contrarian. The author is Christopher Hitchens. What's your next project?
In the year 2003, it will be the centennial of George Orwell, the centennial of George Orwell's birth. And I've written a book which will come out in the middle of next year, saying why I think he was one of the most important writers of the 20th century and should be honored again. So I think we haven't got a title yet, but provisionally it's called The Victory of George Orwell.
We thank you for joining us. Come back again.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
By the way, C-SPAN made a mistake, and we want to correct it in our coverage of the UN General Assembly, which, by the way, was originally scheduled to meet in late September, postponed because of the events of September the 11th, and meeting throughout the next week. We had misidentified one of the speakers. It was South Korean Prime Minister Lee Han-dong. We had identified him as the North Korean Prime Minister. He, of course, is the South Korean Prime Minister. We apologize for that mistake, and we thank our audience for letting us know about that. Speaking of C-SPAN coverage of the events in New York City and on this Veterans Day here in Washington at Arlington National Cemetery, Vice President Dick Cheney will be among the speakers. Our live coverage will get underway in about 25 minutes with the musical interlude and the remarks getting underway at 11 o'clock. President Bush is at the site of the World Trade Center for a ceremony that will take place this afternoon at 1:30 East Coast time, 10:30 for those of you in the West Coast, and we'll have live coverage of that again here on C-SPAN. Don't forget to check out American Politics tonight, which will include Karl Rove, who spoke to a conservative group here this past Thursday, and Senator Joe Lieberman, who was up in Manchester, New Hampshire, speaking to New Hampshire Democrats. That's American Politics and Book Notes. The topic tonight is a new book, Roosevelt's Secret War, followed by Prime Minister's Questions, which is seen tonight at 9 Eastern, 6 o'clock for those of you in the West Coast. And Peter Bergen, who is out with a book called Holy War Incorporated, will be here tomorrow morning to take your calls. His book, by the way, is previewed in the Washington Post book section today. And a reminder on C-SPAN 2.
It was a serialized in Vanity Fair this week.
It is?
Yep.
Thank you.
Great book. A great issue of the magazine, too.
The book, that's okay. Judith Miller's book, Germs, Biological Weapons and America's Secret War. You can watch her tonight at 7:30 Eastern Time. She is in New York at the 92nd Street Y, all part of C-SPAN's Book TV coverage. We thank you for joining us on this Veterans Day. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.